Hey guys, welcome to episode 11 of the Tech Check. Before we begin, here's a word from our sponsor.
Today's sponsor is Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. It has creation tools that allows you to create and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. Anchor also distributes your podcast for you on multiple platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can make money with no minimum listenership, and everything is in one place to create a podcast. Download Anchor on the App Store or Play Store, or you can go to anchor.fm to create your podcast today. All right, guys, welcome back to episode 11 of the Tech Check. Today, we're going to be continuing our little PC mini series. So, here's episode 2 of our mini series, I guess. We're going to be talking about CPUs. So, Vinay, tell us what you know about CPUs. What is a CPU?
All right, so CPU is a central processing unit. And what do you guys think are some things to consider when choosing a CPU?
Basically, you want to see how fast it like actually is. I mean, you can look at like core count, thread count, or all that. But also, like when you're trying to buy a CPU, you got to consider if you're gonna overclock it or not. If you're gonna overclock it, you got to drop a little bit more money for an unlocked version of the CPU, because for a locked version of the CPU, there's no setting to overclock it. Like you just can't. So, I mean, those are, I guess, some of the things that I look for. Also, if you can actually support your GPU and, if your motherboard supports it. But that's just compatibility. But those are some of the things that I look for.
Yeah, I mean, I know that like a lot of us will be going to college soon, and a lot of us are building our PCs not only for gaming but also for school. So, like, what are some things to look for within like when you purchase a CPU for when you go to college? Like, I know obviously you're gonna need a lot of multitasking. Like, you might have like a CAD software on like the left hand side and maybe some instructions on the right, or some random. That's just a random example, but
I
um,
mean, for that example, you probably are talking about RAM.
Yeah,
but
That's not
like
really that's
I don't
not
know. I've
really a
read some.
CPU load.
I'm not a pro at this stuff, but I've read somewhere that like you need more threads for like multitasking or something. I'm not sure because
I mean,
I
oh
know
it
some
yeah, no,
people.
helps.
for
It
multitasking.
helps, but
Yeah, no, because like a lot
but
of people stream, right? So like they'll probably have their
Well,
stream on like one
mul-
monitor, I guess.
multitasking is the idea of multitasking is where you're going to need a CPU, not the actual stuff itself. Because essentially, what a CPU does is process instructions that are being sent, to the computer and sending it elsewhere. That's all CPU does. Um, so yes, having more cores, more threads, better clock speeds, etc., is going to help with multitasking, but it's not going to directly help with creating a CAD model or
yeah,
directly help with
for
streaming.
Yeah, that was a
for
pretty bad
multi
example.
for multitasking, RAM is where you have to focus more.
All right, so obviously now that we spoke about the basics of a CPU, I know one thing that we should probably consider is the clock speed. What do you think
Hmm.
should be the clock speed of like a budget build, a mid-range build, and a high-end build, in your opinion?
Honestly,
Well,
I'm not
yeah,
that good with the numbers of clock speeds in general. I know
yeah,
for
I
a
just
higher end, it's around 4.0 ish. I know the PS5 has I know we're talking about PCs here, but the PS5 has like a what 5.5 ish clock speed, which is insane.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's for its SSD. My bad. But you know, I know the CPU for the PS5 is supposed to be stupid fast for instruction reading and speed and efficiency, that whatever the PS5 is going for there. But
hmm
it's probably going to be all I know that numbers wise, it's going to be above 4 ish for a good clock speed.
yeah. I mean, I don't like know the clock speed by numbers, but I usually just compare different CPUs with benchmarks, and then just look at the differences between them. So I don't know the exact clock speed numbers, but Yeah, I guess like for stock clock speed, probably 4,000 hertz, like somewhere around there.
All right, nice. So yeah, now that we got all the basic stuff out of the way, you guys want to talk about maybe some consumer CPUs? Like maybe like what's the best gaming CPU in your opinion?
I mean, for gaming, right now you probably aren't going to use these CPUs because two of the most powerful CPUs, obviously not the Ryzen Threadripper and Intel Xeon because that's just extremely overpriced, but
How much is
the
it?
Intel, it's like 10K for the
Oh my
Intel
god.
one and 4,000 for the Threadripper.
Yeah, no, those aren't meant for gaming. Those are for high-end stuff like AI, deep learning, that
Yeah,
sort of stuff. Like how we mentioned with hardcore GPUs in the previous episode, right?
yeah. I mean, honestly, even i9s and the Ryzen 9 series are like, the
Yeah,
3990X
even those
and
are
the
a bit overkill.
i9.
It's not like you're gonna
You
need
don't,
them for
you're
gaming.
never going to use it for that much. You're not
Yeah,
going to
no,
use the full potential for gaming.
A Ryzen 7, maybe even a Ryzen 5 might be able to accomplish the same thing.
Hmm. Yeah, honestly, yeah, you can just get a Ryzen 5 and just be like set.
Yeah, but the best in the market right now, not including the stupid overpriced ones we talked about earlier. Um, I know one of them it has to be the Intel i9 series when just talking about sheer power,
Yeah,
because
like
that's
the
what Intel is kind
99K
of known
version.
for CPUs.
Yeah, the 9900K version
Yeah,
of it, and then Ryzen 9 3990X is pretty much the same performance, but the price
made by
is
AMD
really what,
instead. Yeah,
of course, yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, the price is a little lower because AMD is cool.
yeah. Actually, it's isn't it pretty significantly lower?
I don't know. I don't know the exact price, but
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously both of those CPUs are definitely one of the best in the market. Um, I just looked it up right now, and it seems like the AMD Ryzen 9 is $200 more than the Intel Core i9.
that's
So
interesting.
The
yeah,
AMD is more expensive.
yeah, that's interesting, right?
Well,
AMD Ryzen 9 is $689, while the Intel Core i9 is $434, and this is both on Amazon.
Interesting.
shouldn't I? Okay, I would probably check Newegg just because they're more
Mm.
tech-related source for PC building, but yeah, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Amazon's gonna be $200 off, but I think we generally know it's gonna be more expensive than the. I mean, the Intel will be less expensive than the Ryzen or AMD.
Yeah, I
Huh.
mean, usually for most of the AMD versus Intel CPUs, AMD is much more on the cheaper side. Like if you compare,
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised.
yeah, if you compare the i7 and like i7s compared to the Ryzen 5s,
Hmm.
they both have like the same output, but
Hmm.
it's like half the price for AMD. At least when I checked. This is like last month. So
Okay,
prices could
yeah,
have changed
that's pretty
a
recent.
lot. Yeah, but
Do you
I
think
doubt.
parts will become cheaper with the coronavirus pandemic and like possibly newer parts will be coming out? Like the older
No,
ones.
Um, I think only GPUs right now are gonna get cheaper, but that's just because they're coming out with new series. But I don't know about CPUs. I can't
yeah,
really say much about CPUs.
Yeah, I mean with this whole like new generation of gaming, you don't really know. I mean, I know typically when you build a PC, you try to build it sort of for the future to support future games.
Hmm.
I don't know, it'll be kind of interesting to see like whether there'll be any new CPUs with better performance coming out with which are more affordable. Just something interesting to look for.
I mean, that's just how the market works. There's always going
Yeah.
to be cheaper options, so I'm not really
Hmm.
too worried about that. Um,
Yeah.
if anything, the only thing I'd be surprised by is if, you know, a new age CPU came out for extremely low prices, because that'd be kind of weird. But you know,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's no real rush because right now, like, like, you can get like somewhat older gen CPUs that support somewhat higher end graphics cards. So I don't think they really have to like. They're not behind. They're probably ahead right now, actually, because they
Mhm.
already have like Ryzen 9 and i9s. Like those could probably easily. I mean, those will probably easily support the new GPUs coming out later this
yeah,
year.
Yeah.
yeah. I don't really see much of a problem in terms of current CPUs handling new GPUs coming out.
Hmm.
Nice. All right. Yeah. I mean, no, we already spoke about some of the best budget consumer CPUs. I believe we spoke about the AMD Ryzen 5. But do you guys have any other possible budget CPUs that consumers could get?
Well, yeah, like for me, I already got it, but I'm getting or I'm using the AMD Ryzen 5 3600
Hmm.
for
Same.
my PC build.
That's what I'm looking
And
at too.
yeah, I mean it's a really good CPU. I was thinking of getting the X, but I mean I'm kind of a little tight on budget, so there's no real performance. I mean there is a slight performance difference between the 3600 and 3600X. Like yes, the 3600X is slightly better, but is it worth the extra money?
Like, how much
Probably
extra money
not.
are we talking? I guess.
The time that I got my 3600, it was $155, and 3600 was 199. So
Hmm.
40
$40
bucks,
ish.
Yeah, that's
$40 for slight better performance wasn't really worth it. I mean, right now the 3600 went up to 175 bucks, but I
mhm.
still don't think 20 bucks is worth it.
Yeah. Um, I mean, this goes for the rest of the AMD CPU series. Most of the X, the X, X line. So again, with the Ryzen 5 3600 and the Ryzen 5 3600X, or any similar situations later are higher up in the ACD hierarchy. ACD? No, AMD hierarchy. Um, there isn't going to be an extraordinary power difference between the two. It's going to be slight, but that being said, if you have the budget and you can afford it, you may as well throw it in because who knows, that slight power difference might actually be worth it.
Hmm. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I think the 3600 is a good overall one because you can support pretty high end graphics cards. Like I'm getting uh RTX 2070 with it. So
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, no, I've seen a lot of other builds use Ryzen 5 3600. Really, really good all around CPU.
and it comes with a pretty nice stock cooler, the Wraith Stealth cooler. It's a pretty nice stock cooler.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Another one to talk about is probably the Ryzen 3 2200G. Uh, Also, good budget CPU. Less powerful than the Ryzen 5 because it's a 3 series compared to a 5 series, but it's still one worth looking at if you're interested in it. I would still probably recommend the Ryzen 5 3600 over it, but
Hmm.
if you're even tighter on a budget, then I mean you may as well look at it because why
Yeah, I mean honestly, if you're just looking to build like a pure gaming PC, you could honestly go for pretty lower end like CPU because games don't require that much CPU usage. It's mainly GPU usage that's really taken into consideration, and then RAM if you're running like Discord streams or whatever in the background. But games are more demanding on like significantly more demanding on GPU than CPU. CPU is more for like other stuff like on your PC. So
not.
if you're looking to just to build a strict gaming PC, or like you're only gonna game on it and nothing else really, you
Yeah,
could
you can flock out
probably
a little bit.
you could go for a much cheaper you know CPU. So like you might see in the benchmarks that like all right like a really low end CPUs like having the same or very similar benchmarks as a really high-end CPU in a game. I mean, that's just because it's not really being used as much in the game. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really have to output much.
So again, if you're looking for, if you want to get a good CPU, again, it's not going to affect your gameplay much. It's not going to increase your frame rate. It's not going to increase your graphics. Not really anything along those lines. But for daily use, a good CPU will probably come in handy if you're doing multiple things at once and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's it from us when it comes to CPUs and stuff. If you guys have any questions, comments, recommendations, anything along those lines, contact us via the Google form if you have recommendations, some comments on YouTube, our social media. We'll probably respond there because we're all pretty lonely. But in the end, stay safe, wear a mask, that sort of stuff, and stay tuned for next week.